Sahana bhavatu sahana bhunaktu saha viryam karavavahai tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Okay, so we're on module 3.2. We're now entering the conversation of moksha. Let's recap. So, Bhagavad Gita, it's a lot going on, very condensed. The most effective way to understand the Bhagavad Gita in a way that we can apply it in our lives is by using the template of the Purusharthas, Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. Using that template, you overlay it on the Bhagavad Gita, and everything in the Bhagavad Gita becomes now relatable and practically applicable in life. Dharma is of the 700 verses in Bhagavad Gita, the largest hundreds and hundreds of verses are on Dharma, and another several hundred verses are on Moksha. So Dharma and Moksha are the two most talked about topics in the Bhagavad Gita in terms of quantitatively speaking. There is Artha, dozens upon dozens of verses, and Kama, dozens upon dozens of verses on Kama. So very important. But the other two, Dharma and Moksha, quantitatively, Krishna's more expansive on touching those things. So Dharma, remember, Dharma is, in this context, in the context of the Purusharthas, Dharma is nature, right? Like the Dharma of water is that it's wet, that it is, while it's liquid, it also acts as a solid. In other words, it cannot be compressed. When it comes in contact with fire, it becomes gaseous, vapor, and you can compress it. All these, the nature of water and how water interacts with the world around us, how it's corrosive, how it increases other substances in volume. All these things about water, the physics of water, that's the dharma of water. So similarly, the dharma of this world, how prakriti relates to karma, how time relates to the soul, all of the different natures of our material reality is described in dharma. Social dynamics, how these social statuses relate to this social situation, all these different, everything about our reality is dharma, right? The nature of reality and its interactions. That's dharma. Then we have to separate, because there's two intrinsic realities. There is kshetra, the material reality, our physical, tangible reality and experience of the body, the world we live in. Then there is kshetragya, right? So kshetra is a field, it's material, physical reality. Then there's kshetragya, the knower of the field. That's the soul, right? The soul, the jiva, and the supreme. However you define the supreme, that's another topic, but the supreme. So you have these, so you have a material reality, which is changing, which is temporary, which is malleable, and all these different things. Then you have a spiritual reality, which is eternal, which is unchanging, which is constitutionally joyful and spiritual in nature. And these two together are our total reality. Problem, as we know, is that 99% of the individuals in the world spend 99% of their time focusing only on the material reality, not recognizing or not accepting, not validating, not acknowledging their spiritual identity, right? Chardin, we are not material beings endeavoring to be spiritual. We are spiritual beings going through a material and experiencing a material reality. So these two taken together is our total existence, materially, spiritually, and dharma is how all of these things interact. So Krishna spends hundreds of verses in the Bhagavad Gita describing how all of these things interact. Now, even though Krishna spends hundreds of verses on dharma, we have to recognize that this is happening historically on a battlefield, right? This is, one could say, this was the very first TED talk of its time. Krishna does not have a lot of time to really go into detail. That's the rest of the Vedic literature. And this is why the Bhagavad Gita is so powerful and at the same time so relevant. It's because it is condensed. It is a TED talk of what's essential for the human being to experience, to create, to live to its highest potential. Then there is artha, right? We know what our reality is, dharma, and all how it all relates, how it all comes together, the nature of ourselves, the supreme time, nature, so on and so forth. We've understood all of that. And then we come to artha. Artha means livelihood. How do we actually exist physically in a healthy way in this world? How are we going to make a living? Very important. And it's Bhagavad Gita gives no less importance to it. It is essential. It is purushartha. It is part of what is required for the human being to reach his highest potential. We have to have a livelihood. The key is to make sure we have a livelihood that is conducive to us reaching our greatest potential. That's artha. We have to have a livelihood. Let's ensure that the livelihood we have pushes us and enables us to reach our full potential, empowers us to reach and manifest our full potential in this material world without negating our spiritual identity. How do we reach that highest potential? We have to have a livelihood. And then dharma, artha, kama. Kama is the nature of our physical body. The physical body needs to eat. The physical body needs to sleep. We need to have shelter. The senses, the material senses, have a proclivity to engage with their objects. We want to taste something nice. We want to see something nice. We want to experience something pleasurable. Yes, how do we do that? But in a manner that is also uplifting and empowering. Because if it's not uplifting and empowering, then we can abuse this, right? We can go into addictions. We can, disease develops. So how do we take this impetus of the material body to engage with the sense objects, but in a manner that is uplifting and empowering and leads us as well to our highest potential? Kama, also essential and talked about in the Gita. And then we come to moksha, which is literally means freedom, liberation freedom from the restrictions of this world. The primary restrictions, kam, krodh, lobha, moha, mada, matsarya, right? Lust, anger, greed, delusion, arrogance, and envy. These are restrictions that inhibit our ability to manifest and live at our full potential. So moksha is how do we break free of that? Breaking free of those things, we're able to live at our highest potential. And Krishna spends hundreds and hundreds of verses of the Gita upon that, because that's essentially what we're point, right? If we're not living in freedom, if we do not have freedom, then we're imprisoned, we're restricted, we're limited. So the entire purpose, and this is why it's part of the Purusharthas, the human beings, the Purusha, at our highest potential, we are free. We are not inhibited, we're not restricted, we are not controlled by circumstances. We exist at our highest level of manifestation in freedom. So now this is the section we're working through now. We have about 6 more modules to go. We finished the course. So we're moving right along. So moksha. So this verse in this module is Dashamrita Gita number 9. When we get to Dashamrita Gita number 10, that'll be the final instruction on moksha. Yonta sukontaramas tathantar jyotirevayah sayogi brahma nirvanam brahma bhuto vigachati. Krishna instructs one whose happiness is within, who is active and rejoices within, and whose aim is inward, is actually the perfect mystic. That person is liberated in the supreme, and ultimately they attain the supreme. All right, so Krishna is saying within. We talked about kshetra, kshetragya. Kshetra is the external, changeable, temporary material reality, important reality. We exist in this reality. We therefore must validate and acknowledge the our part in this reality. However, there is an eternal nature, internal, forgive me, nature and identity, our spiritual nature. So when Krishna says our happiness is within, we rejoice within, our aim is inward. Krishna is saying that is the actual yogi. So there are three key words here: anta sukha, anta arama, and anta jyoti. So anta sukha means happiness, but it's anta, inside. Happiness that resides within. In other words, we have everything within ourselves to experience pleasure. We do not have to go outside to experience joy, satisfaction that can be achieved within. We haven't done that. Right? 99% of the world spends 99% of its time chasing, believing that happiness is external, something outside of us. But actually, happiness is within. It's right there at our fingertips. It's not difficult to experience. The trouble is we're not habituated to going within. That's all. It's just a habit. The process is not difficult. The attainment is not difficult. It's developing the habit because it requires choice. That's where freedom comes in. We have to choose it and then make it a habit. That's the difficulty. Anta arama means that which gives pleasure from within. And this is really, to put it in a succinctly, it's about meaning. What gives us a sense of meaning? There's happiness, and of course, and that's fine, happiness, pleasure, and so on. But a sense of meaning is a sense of satisfaction that not quite happiness, so to speak. So this sense of meaning is a more accurate way of understanding antararama that also comes from within. Doesn't mean we do not get meaning from things outside of us or in the world around us. No, just like we can experience pleasure by watching a good movie, eating a wonderful meal. There's nothing wrong with that. It's simply not a necessity. We can get meaning outside of ourselves and make our relationships or our work perfectly fine, but that does not take away from the fact that we can also get meaning from within. Not that we can also get meaning. In fact, the source of meaning can be identified and experienced within. So that's anta sukha, anta arama, and antar jyoti. Antar jyoti means the light within. In Vedic philosophy and spirituality, jyoti always references, it's a term that's used to invoke knowledge, right? So whenever you hear about like Diwali, you just had Diwali, wonderful celebrations, and the lighting of the lamps. This is Jyoti. This is actually signifying, yes, victory over good over evil. That's obviously what it is celebrating. But I don't want to go off into a tangent of Diwali, but I'll be very brief here. This idea of victory of good over evil, it's in Vedic philosophy, actually, and I hesitate to touch on this because this is its own its own force, if you will. In Vedic thought, philosophy, there is no such thing as good and bad, good and evil. There is knowledge and ignorance. When there is knowledge, you can change everything. If you put things, Vedic scriptures tell us, in terms of good and evil, you respond to them in a way that is not beneficial for anyone around. If you just think in terms of good or evil. And we can see this in writing. You have a person who is criminally inclined, and when you label them good or bad, it is much harder to remediate that individual, right? You know, particularly in prison systems and punitive systems that simply cast criminals in the gulag and lock them up and throw away the key. There is, as soon as they come out, they recommit the same crime. There is no change. There is no rehabilitation. Recidivism is through the roof. They continue to engage crime time after time after time again. But in those systems, and it's been proven in those systems and countries who have a more mature view of such things, they look at it in terms of knowledge and ignorance. They put them through a system and they actually rehabilitate them. They train them up. They give them knowledge. They give them the ability to cope with whatever difficulties they're going through. And with recidivism, falls off the cliff. It goes way down. So it's the same principle. Don't see things in terms of good and bad, because then we react. We do not know how to deal with such situations effectively. If we look at things in terms of knowledge and ignorance, then we can better impact. First of all, our response is more mature and more beneficial for all involved. And we're able to impact the situation in a more positive way because we're dealing with the true issue, the true problem, which is lack of knowledge, lack of understanding. This doesn't mean we're not talking about letting people go around committing foolishness and crimes. It's not quite the contrary. In fact, with knowledge, you actually deal with the underlying issues so that there can be reform and change. I didn't want to go down that road. So when we celebrate Diwali, Diwali is about not good and evil. It's about the knowledge. What was the difference between Ram and Ravan? If you take, that's completely going off topic, but let's go down this road for a moment. If you take the resume of Ram on paper and you take the resume of Ravan on paper, they're actually identical. Ram's knowledge of the Vedic literature was no different from Ravan. Ravan was an absolute Vedic scholar. Ram's knowledge of the arts was equaled by Ravan's knowledge of the arts. Ram's understanding of social dynamics and leadership was non-different from Ravan's ability and his knowledge of social dynamics and leadership. On paper, if you were in HR and you had to hire these two people and you got their resumes on their desk, they were both equally qualified in that regard. What was the difference? The difference is the knowledge of self-mastery. The only difference between Ram and Ravan is that Ravan had no control over Kam, Krodh, Lobha, Moha, Mada, Matsarya. That's all. Knowledge means the understanding of how to transcend, how to move beyond that influence. That's the only difference between Ram and Ravan. Knowledge. Spiritual knowledge, this antarjoti. That's the only difference between Ram and Ravan. This spiritual knowledge of how to rise above, how to not be controlled by Kam, Krodh, Lobha, Moha, Mada, Matsarya. Okay, I've gotten off point. Let's get back to the issue at hand. So Krishna is saying in this verse what terms? Anta Sukha, happiness within. Anta Arama, gaining meaning from within. Antarjoti, having that knowledge which also exists within, on how to live with meaning, how to live in happiness in this world while maintaining, acknowledging our spiritual identity and reality. Let's describe the moksha concept. So we have jiva, bhuta. You and I, all living creatures, are jiva, soul, bhuta, nature. Jiva, bhuta. In the jiva, bhuta state or stage of our existence, the living entity, you, I, all living creatures, we are under the control of the Arisha Dvargas, right? So in this state, Ravan is a jiva bhuta because he's under the control, the conditioning of the Arisha Dvargas. So in that state, the living entity, we're all described as jiva bhuta. Then there is Brahma bhuta. Brahma bhuta is that state where there is self-realization. So Ram would be described as Brahma bhuta, just for the sake of this discussion. Ram is beyond that, but for the sake of this discussion. Ram is Brahma bhuta because Ram was beyond the conditioning of the Arisha Dvargas. So in our state, as Jiva Bhuta, we are conditioned. When we achieve moksha, when we achieve freedom from Arisha Dvargas, then the same living entity, we would be described as Brahma Bhuta. That's the state we're in, spiritual state. This is equivalent to Jivan Mukti. We're in this material world, in this material body, but we're not controlled and ruled by the Arisha Dvargas. We are Jivan Mukti in the stage called Brahma Bhuta. Then there's Brahma Nirvana. Brahma Nirvana is also popularized in Buddhism. They mean the same thing, but to pinpoint the difference between Brahma Bhuta and Brahma Nirvana, because they're often just mashed together. Brahma Nirvana is the state after having left this material body, after death. That state of still moksha, still not controlled or beyond the control of the Arisha Dvargas, but also no longer in the material body. That level, that state of being is called Brahma Nirvana. Beyond samsara, also known as Videha Mukti, liberation or freedom outside of the material body. That's Brahma Nirvana. So that's the difference between Brahma Bhuta and Brahma Nirvana. They're not the same thing. Now, it is important to understand this, and I'll tell you why. But first, I want to give an example. Anta Sukha, happiness within. Anta Arama, meaning that comes from within. Anta Jyoti, the knowledge and understanding that already exists within us that gives us the self-awareness, the self-knowledge to exist in our spiritual identity and reality. Let's give you an example. Anta Sukha is you're in your home and you're happy at home. You're safe, you have all the accoutrements, the furniture, the luxury you need, or at least the necessities you need, the food, the water, everything you need is self-contained. You're perfectly happy within your home. Anta Sukha. No need to go outside. Antararama, this idea of meaning, means you have not only do you have a home that is comfortable to live in, but you also have really everything within the home that gives fulfillment. Fulfillment, you have there's projects or there's things you can do, you have the entertainment you require, books, whatever it is, you have genuine fulfillment at home. This is antararama. Not just a self home and a warm home, but everything you need to have a fulfilling life while you're at home. This is antararama. Antarjyoti means that knowledge within, you actually have the ability to live in this home. You can cook your own meals. You have the ability to work the entertainment system. But you know how to read. So the books that you have what it takes. You have the knowledge, the understanding to get the best experience within the home. This is Antarjyoti. Now, this is all well and good. This is all in fact, essential, right? One must have, without a stable home, a home environment that is safe, that is warm, gives you a sense of personal security, where personal manifestation, where you can live and be your full and complete self within your own home. Absolutely essential, both as an adult and especially as children. No, not taking away from that. But there's also more. And that's where we come to understand, introduce the concept, Krishna introduces the concept of Param Dhamma or Brahma Nirvana, right? So we're living in the home. This is a stage of Brahma Bhuta, right? Happiness comes from within, meaning comes from within. We have the knowledge to experience and create a life within. That's Brahma Bhuta. Perfectly, an essential, not perfect, an essential state of being to have a secure, fulfilling, meaningful home life. Essential. Beyond that is when we come to what's Brahma Nirvana. Brahma Nirvana. Now, in the PDF, you'll see there's the Brahma Bhuta stage. I have a little diagram. And then there's two possible end destinations, if you will. One is Brahma Nirvana, which is after the death of this body, you experience a state of spiritual existence. But there's another possibility called Param Dhamma. And Krishna throws this out all throughout the Bhagavad Gita. Param Dhamma, Param is the supreme, Dhamma means above. Param Dhamma is love. Param Dhamma is going outside of your house, not because you do not have a safe house, a safe place to stay, not because you do not have a home, you do not have all of it. You still have the Brahma Bhuta. Everything at home is perfectly fine. But you also have the capacity to go into the world and have relationships of love, a loving relationship. This is Param Dhamma, because it is in loving relationships that we actually manifest our greatest possibilities. We live at the full spectrum of our possibilities, can be manifest in loving relationships. And we know this, I mean, even in secular science and studies, we live longer when we're in loving relationships. We have more fulfilling lives when we're in loving relationships. We are healthier when we're in loving relationships. We feel more satisfied. Everything is, the human being thrives when they're in loving relationships. Medically, scientifically, even anecdotally, when individuals, when they're having, I have a misspelled word here, forgive me, individuals who self-report on happiness, the ones who describe themselves in deep, fulfilling, or have many deep and fulfilling relationships, they always describe themselves as being happier. This is because it's simply a manifestation of our spiritual reality, right? Kama, this principle of seeking satisfaction and desire, is a manifestation of Icha, the spiritual principle of Icha, the desire, the will to experience satisfaction. Sukha, happiness, is the material manifestation of the spiritual principle of Ananda, spiritual bliss, right? Similarly, bhakti, unconditional love, manifests in this material world as maituna, manifests in this material world as, unfortunately, love, but that is convoluted and not unconditional, that has all kinds, that is beset by the influences of the Arishad Vargas, essentially. But it's a reflection, it's a manifestation of bhakti, a spiritual principle, state of existence of unconditional love. The Brahma Bhuta stage is essential because freedom is required. There cannot be love without freedom. So Brahma Bhuta stage is the state of achieving freedom. When there is freedom, we can then choose love, choose bhakti, choose to live and experience and manifest love. Freedom is essential. Otherwise, we go into relationships like in this world, and we experience relationships fraught with anger, delusion, narcissism. It's just all kinds of unnecessary challenges. Now, it doesn't mean that we will not experience such, but it does mean we can react without being drawn into another person's narcissism, anger, and their issues with the Arisha Dwargas. We can operate from a space of knowledge and therefore interact. It may mean separating ourselves, absolutely, right? You don't go and pet the tiger thinking it's a cute kitty cat. No, you put up a fence. The tiger lives there. You live here. So there is knowledge and understanding, not sentimentality. So we'll end here. We'll wrap up with this. So this is in this particular verse, Krishna's talking about moksha. So first, it must be, yes, internal happiness, satisfaction that comes from within, knowledge that exists from within. All of that is within. We do not need to go outside ourselves. Everything with that wonderful verse from the Upanishads. Om Purnamadha Purnamidham Purnat Purnamudhachite Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Purna means complete. The Supreme is complete. We are parts of the Supreme. We are perfectly complete. The problem is we are distracted and we have a habit of chasing something outside of ourselves. When we, right here, right now, internally are perfectly complete. Happiness can be found within. Meaning can be found within. The knowledge and understanding of self-awareness is within. We are perfectly complete right here, right now. The difficulty is we have not developed the habit of choosing to live within. I'm going to read the translation one more time to tie this all together. Krishna says, Yontasu kontararamas tathantar jyotirevayah sayogi brahma nirvanam brahma bhuto dhigachati. One whose happiness is within, who is active and rejoices within, whose aim is inward, is actually the perfect mystic. That person is liberated in the Supreme, and ultimately they attain the Supreme. So they're liberated in the Supreme, Brahma Bhuta, and they ultimately attain the Supreme, Brahma Nirvana or Paramdhamma. If they want to be in relationships of love, Paramdhamma. If they're not interested in relationships of love, remember, because we have choice. At the stage of Brahma Bhuta, we have choice. We can choose relationships of love, or we can choose Brahma Nirvana, pure spiritual existence without relationships. That is our choice. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunatu Sahaviryam Karuvavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. I have not yet put the test in the Google Classroom, but I will do so later today. Hari Hari.